I will officially call the meeting of the Technology and Calculator Subcommittee to order. I'm Regina Quick, and welcome to everyone who's online. We're expecting a few more folks to pop in here. It's been a while since this subcommittee has officially met for official business. In fact, the last meeting of the subcommittee was August 23rd, 2017, which was about a year following the release of the online child support calculator. So again, welcome to everybody. We're going to do just probably one item of business that requires a vote today, assuming we get a quorum of the committee, and then have discussion about some upcoming matters that might require action. And then the committee meetings for the balance of the subcommittee meeting dates for the balance of the year might be dependent on what the actual committee, commission as a whole does and what other committees recommend to the commission as a whole. So again, welcome. And Latana, I'm going to ask you at this time if you will just review the meeting rules. This is a hybrid meeting, and just explain to everyone who's online how the meeting will be conducted.
Yes, thank you, Regina. We'll just go over a few rules to help us navigate the meeting via Zoom today, via Zoom webinar. The commission members and staff are panelists and can speak anytime during the meeting. All others are considered attendees and are muted during the meeting. We will not take public comments during today's Technology and Calculator Subcommittee meeting. I'll pass it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much for that. And Noelle, if you could just explain our quorum rules and whether or not they're previous minutes.
Yes, absolutely. So we have 6 members currently of the subcommittee. That requires more than a majority to reach quorum. So we need 4 folks out of 6. We're currently at 3. I'm just double checking that I haven't missed anybody on Zoom, but I'm still seeing only 3.
I've just received a message from Representative Rich. She is trying to log on and has not received the link to do that. So if someone could perhaps email Representative Rich the correct link so that when we get to our item of business, she can participate, and we will have a quorum for that. While we're struggling to get a quorum, that actually highlights entry number A and entry number 1 on our agenda, and the reason for that. Because it's been a while since the subcommittee met, there were members, when we contacted them to sort of reorganize and get prepared for the work that might be to come, who for various reasons wanted to drop off. Some of them had been working from the outset of the commission on this subcommittee. In fact, I didn't do a very good job of introducing myself to you other members and people who may be listening. I am Regina Quick. I currently serve as general counsel to the Lieutenant Governor, and I was appointed to the Child Support Commission by Governor Kemp as a former chair of the State Bar Family Law section. Also, believe it or not, I was a member of the Low Income Deviation Study Committee back in 2008, as well as the Electronic Worksheet Task Force in 2008. So I too have been struggling, just like practitioners and the public, with all things calculator and child support guidelines almost from the beginning. So with that, one of the first orders of business for getting ready for this meeting was to try to reach out to perhaps bring in some practitioners and folks who have experience with the child support calculator to join this subcommittee. And the way that that works is I find willing volunteers who have expertise that I may know about, and then those names are submitted to the chair of the commission for approval. I have submitted 3 names of practitioners to Judge Key for his approval, And hopefully, we will hear back from him in time for the business matters that we expect to be forthcoming by the end of the year. And so those 3 individuals, I think at least 2 of which may be with us online. Young Lee, I think, is with us there, and she is a brand new judicial officer for the Fulton Family Division, and also a 15-year, if I did my math right or so, sole practitioner with experience in family law, and her office was there in Duluth. Did I get that right? I hope. And
Yes,
so
that's right.
welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the generous welcome.
And we will be back in touch with you hopefully soon. Anna Bolden, I see Anna on the line. I might also say Judge Bolden, because she serves as municipal judge for City Nicholson, City of Arcade. Anna is a family law practitioner in Athens, my old stomping grounds in Athens, and practices in all the circuits around northeast and east of Athens, and also toward Metro. Anna, welcome. I see you there. And Jackie Fortier, I don't think Jackie's with us yet this morning. She is a solicitor, also part-time solicitor down in Kingsland, so that South Georgia, and she practices also in Florida down there, which I thought would be particularly helpful as we discuss some things that are on the agenda for the full commission to continue discussing toward the end of the year. So Jackie Fortier will hopefully be with us soon. She's served as an associate magistrate down there in Camden County, and has a wealth of family law appellate experience. So with that, I don't know if we've been successful in getting Representative Rich.
Well, and that's what I was gonna, Regina, I'm sorry to interrupt on that. This is Elaine. I wanted to make sure we sent her the link again at a different email address.
Yes.
And I wanted to see, did she reply to you?
She has replied that it has not come in yet.
Okay,
And
what I
so-
was thinking is that Tani could step out. I have Representative's assistant. We can call her and ask her if she can lend any assistance.
So Representative Rich tells me she is on the phone.
Oh, good.
She
I was just gonna
is
say,
on
we have
via
a
phone,
time.
if you will unmute her.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
And so we will then be at full strength to jump over.
Very good.
I was just about to say a phone call.
Chairman Rich, can you hear me okay? Is she unmuted?
We're unmuting her. She may have to hit *6.
Yes.
Representative Rich, if you can hear me, would you please hit *6?
Okay, I'm here now.
Chairman
I'm
Rich?
unmuted. Sorry.
Good morning. Thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, of course. I apologize that I couldn't get on right away.
Well, we just appreciate your time this morning. I know you are elsewhere. So with that, let us skip over to the one item of business on the agenda that may generate a vote, and that is item C, which is a discussion of the issues related to archiving and deleting shared worksheets. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Okay, this is Elaine Johnson, and I want to give you a brief explanation of what we're talking about. In the child support calculator, once you create a worksheet, it goes into a folder, and within that folder, you're allowed to archive and then delete a worksheet if you want to clean up. Maybe you've created 5 worksheets for the purpose of comparing different aspects of the case, but you also need to archive. That works well for you as long as you created the worksheet or someone in your organization created the worksheet. However, if it's a shared worksheet, we made the decision back in 2000 and probably 15 in that time frame when we were designing the online child support calculator that you use today. We made the decision that a shared worksheet would not have that same feature available. Shared worksheet means I create a worksheet, maybe I'm in law office A, and you're in law office B, and you represent and I represent the different parties, And I create a worksheet that I want to share with you so that you can see what it is I'm proposing in that worksheet. So there's a feature in the calculator within that folder called Share Worksheet. And when you click it, you put in the email address of the attorney you want to receive that worksheet, and you indicate whether you want them to have modified capability or read only. And then in the second field, there's a place for you to indicate, do I want this shared for 1 week? I think it's, there's a 1 year, 1 month, and I think never expires is the other one. And once you've shared that worksheet, the person who has received it as a shared worksheet, they can go in and see that worksheet, they can make edits to it, but it doesn't alter anything within your original worksheet. But the problem we've run into, we've had requests from lawyers in particular who've contacted me and said, well, I have all these shared worksheets within my folder that have been shared with me. The case is finished, and I want to be able to archive that worksheet and then delete it because I simply don't need it any longer in my active folders. And right now, that feature is not active. And again, that decision was made, back in probably 2014, 2015, we were working on that design of that calculator. And I think it was sort of an anticipation of, we weren't certain how many worksheets would get shared to begin with. And we also weren't certain about whether or not there would be an issue with deleting a shared worksheet at that time. There shouldn't be any kind of issue in doing that. We've had several years now of this calculator being active. August 8, 2016 was the birth date of the current calculator. So we're now in the position of wanting to go back and revisit and be able to create a process through the coding. The developers would create this and allow someone who has a shared worksheet in their folder to be able to archive that shared worksheet. And maybe you want to archive it and leave it in that status, or you want to archive it and then delete it. And those are two-step processes on purpose to help prevent you from deleting a worksheet that you mistakenly archived. And an archived worksheet can be restored. So we'll be looking at doing the same features for shared worksheet, but that's the question, is whether or not this committee would approve us exploring that possibility. We can report back later, make sure that we can code this correctly so it will do all the functions that we need it to do. We would test and so forth. But if you approve of this, then this would be something we'd move forward with. And, we don't want to make this significant a change without asking the partners involved in this, the people on this subcommittee. We made the decision within a subcommittee many years ago, so we want to leave it in your capable hands in making that decision.
And thank you, Elaine. Before I open that up for discussion and questions from the subcommittee members, let me just seek some clarification from Noel. So would this be, if the subcommittee is so inclined to approve this, would this actually be in the form of a recommendation to the full commission for their meeting on the 19th?
Yes, per our bylaws, no subcommittee can take any official action that's not confirmed by the full commission.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Very well. I'll open it up now to questions to staff from the existing subcommittee members, which would be Ms. Johnson and Representative Rich.
I have a question.
Mr. Bradley.
This is Deborah Johnson. I have a question. This, as I understand what Elaine was just saying, this to me sounds like a no-brainer. So what would be the downside? I was on the committee back in 2015, but I don't remember why we said not to do this.
Deborah, I don't know that this is Elaine. I don't know that there's any downside to it.
Okay.
I don't have my notes from that time period because of the cyber attack. Sorry. So I'm trying to do this from memory, but I think it was sort of, this was an unknown area and maybe we were just trying to be cautious and careful, but we will go back and work with the developers. My take on that would also be if they come back to us and say, hey, we found an issue, they would tell us. and then we could discuss it again. But I'm like you, I think it's a no-brainer to be able to have this functionality.
Thank you.
And Deborah, I wasn't there, but it would seem to me that one of the concerns that you may have had, since it was sort of new, was that if you were sharing a worksheet and you had authorized someone to submit something to a judge, that they could then delete from your own space, and you couldn't go back and see within the calculator itself what you had approved. That maybe there was some question about the technology. I don't know. I'm just guessing because I wasn't there, but I'm understanding from Ms. Johnson that, and she can maybe elaborate on this, that this would still be accessible to the person who the worksheet had been shared with. Is that?
Yeah, the person who originates the share, their worksheet is never touched. It stays, you know, in your folder and no one's touching it. So if it's shared with another person, they can alter it. And if we give them the ability, and that's who we're talking about, is the person that we shared with. They're like, you know, this is in here. We finished that case. I want to be able to delete that. You, as the originator of that worksheet who shared it, you can always archive and delete it. But it's the person who received the share who it's sort of stuck in their folders, and they want to have the same ability to archive and delete as you do as the originator of that worksheet.
Okay.
So
Well, thank you. I think I understood.
This is Bonnie Rich. So right now, when the originator of the shared worksheet archives and deletes, it has no effect on the worksheet that's in the recipient, the shared recipient folder.
That is correct, Representative Rich, yes.
And then my next two questions are somewhat related to each other. I take it that this has been, we've had this request from a number of attorneys, and that the cost is not exorbitant to make this modification.
That would also be correct. There's not going to be any extreme cost involved in doing this, and the time involved in it won't be extensive either. So we'll be able to handle that in-house to get that work done.
Any more questions from the subcommittee members or comments from the subcommittee members? All right, the chair will entertain a motion.
What exactly? I'll make the motion. The motion that we take this to the full commission with a recommendation.
Correct.
That we make the. Okay. I'll make that motion.
This is Ryan. I'll second.
All right. I don't think I let you call roll, Noel. So maybe on this vote you will call roll, and we will establish a quorum for the record.
Sure. For the record, would you please acknowledge your attendance, Representative Rich,
Present.
and whether you're voting for or against?
I'm sorry.
And you're voting in favor of your own motion?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. And Ryan Bradley, for the record, you are here, you seconded that motion, and you're in favor of the motion. Would you please confirm?
That is all correct.
Awesome, thank you, Ryan. And Ms. Deborah Johnson?
I vote in favor.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you very much, subcommittee members, for that, and we will prepare that for the submission to the full commission, hopefully on August the 19th, so that can move forward expeditiously. All right, let's jump back up to B and just get a little update. I'm sorry. I'm the fourth.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay. I took that for granted, but I wanted
yes.
to make sure.
I'm the fourth, and I also
Okay.
vote in favor of Representative Rich's recommendation and a motion. All right, let's go back to B.
Okay. This is Elaine Johnson again, and I'll pick this up and actually touch on something that Representative Rich mentioned. Since this subcommittee has not met since 2017, it's important that we bring you up to speed with some basic information on the child support calculator. I mentioned a moment ago when it was introduced, and since then, in the last year, we have moved the calculator to the AWS hosting. And actually, we did that in 2019. And we've been very pleased with that hosting of the calculator through AWS. There's a lot more security offered there. The AOC and Information Technology Division of the Judicial Council Administrative Office of the Courts is working really, really well with us in promoting good security of the child support calculator and improved, checking for what do we need to do. They're not just working with whatever security is available today. They're constantly looking at how can we improve security. So I'm very pleased with that. There's a group of developers that we work with, and they also have a team leader who I can sit down and talk with periodically, email. In fact, I'm hoping that some of our IT folks might be, Latana's shaking her head. Some of our IT folks are with us today. We appreciate that. We invited them so they could stay abreast of anything that we're doing from this subcommittee, since it might impact their work activity concerning the child support calculator. The last deployments that we had were in January of this year. We did a security upgrade, and we also updated the self-employment taxes paid formula for Schedule B pursuant to 19653A7. And that's an annual update we do every January. And we're working now toward, with the IT development team, we're working now toward a deployment I'm hoping that we'll have that in place before the end of this month, month of August. And that will be to update a few minor things. And so we're very excited about having those things ready to deploy. And when we do a deployment, it will involve a little message on the calculator page saying there could be a couple of hours of interruption. We do this in the early evening time frame so that hopefully we're able to get those deployments with the courts or attorneys. But we will put a message out there so that you'll know, and deployment secured. And that thing I have, unless someone has a question.
Any questions from subcommittee members?
No questions from me.
All right, hearing none, then we will move on to, I'll let staff choose whether you want to talk about D or E first, dealer's choice, because you have, I've asked you to do a little demonstration as to both of them so as to actually visually show the worksheet as we're discussing this for the benefit of members of the public who may be tuned in, and also benefit of subcommittee members. I will say before we get there that this is a great example of what you might be called upon to do on this subcommittee from time to time, even if there's not a meeting. We are a resource for staff to reach out to from time to time with questions about things that come up, including maybe sometimes being guinea pigs with them as they're testing deployments and things of that nature. So this is a very important function, and Elaine, staff, I'll let you decide if you want to go to D or E.
Let's do E for pre-existing order, Noelle. Noelle is going to run the child support calculator for us, and she and I have created a worksheet that includes information on the worksheet tab, as well as Schedule A for income and Schedule D for the additional expenses. And we're going to go now to Schedule B for our adjustment to gross income. And one of the 3 items on that page is the pre-existing child support order. Okay, so first of all, I want to give you a little bit of background on where this originated. We talked about this at the Child Support Statute Review, Child Support Commission Statute Review Subcommittee meeting on July 15, and Chair Quick asked us to make sure this was on the agenda as well. And one of the issues that staff hears, and this is more anecdotal than perhaps anything else, but we hear from attorneys, we've heard from the Division of Child Support Services, that there's a situation out there in the real world where sometimes the pre-existing orders that are included on Schedule B to adjust the gross income of a parent aren't necessarily pre-existing and they aren't necessarily being paid, which are the two requirements. So we thought we should revisit that situation and look at whether or not there's anything statutorily that the commission, statute review would want to do and pass that to the commission. Statute review did not want to take this item up for any kind of change within the statute itself, because it is doing exactly the statute reflects what exactly should be reflected regarding pre-existing child support orders. But it becomes a training issue. We have been training, staff has been training this item since 2007. And, we know that this is an occurrence that happens, and we understand what I've been told is reasoning is the judge is aware, or maybe even the attorneys are aware that this person owes this child support obligation in another case and is including a pre-existing order, even if it doesn't really pre-exist and even if it's not actually being paid, which is the two things required in the statute. So in subsection A of 19615, definition 18, you find an order in another case, and then you also find that it has to be the date and time of filing with the clerk of the initial order for each such other case has to be earlier than the date and time of filing with the clerk of court of the initial order in the case immediately before the court. So that's sometimes feels like, well, gosh, this non-custodial has two more child support orders that do not actually pre-exist. And that's where the sort of policy question comes in, I guess, is that right? Is it wrong? Is it fair? And so I think that's why my understanding is that that's why sometimes these orders get included. So what we want to do is explore how does the pre-existing order work currently in the calculator, ease of use, those types of things regarding pre-existing order, and whether or not there is a better way that we could present the functionality of this particular item within the calculator, keeping in mind that we're serving a lot of people, the self-represented litigants and, private attorneys, mediators, Division of Child Support Services, everybody's using the calculator. So we just want to step through very quickly how this works. And in our worksheet, Noelle is on Schedule B. And in this particular worksheet, we do have parents' incomes that will appear to be lower income. They're above the minimum wage income that would generate, but they're still, we think of as a lower income family.
And Elaine, might I interrupt you just one moment?
Sure.
And say, for the purposes of the committee sort of understanding what we're discussing here, this is not a policy discussion about whether or not the statute should change. That's a different subcommittee. They've made that determination that they're not lifting that up for any sort of statutory change. Our task is to review the current functionality of the calculator and just assess whether or not there's any way to make it any clearer than it already is in this Schedule B, that only pre-existing orders that meet these qualifications should apply. So go ahead.
Good point. Thank you for that. Okay, so you'll see on the screen, and I'm going to stand up just for the sake of making sure I can see clearly enough. You can see on the screen that there's 43A is to add that pre-existing order. Above that, we start with adjustment for pre-existing child support orders being paid for other children. So that's a piece of information that's helpful to some degree. Then we have a paragraph of information telling folks to enter that pre-existing order, the children included in the order, the average monthly child support amount actually paid, excluding arrears payments, and then select 43B, to actually do that function in 43A, and then 43B to make an edit or remove it if you think you've made a mistake and added the wrong order. So Noelle's gonna click 43A for us, and then the dialog box opens. Another set of instructions, telling them basically sort of the definition is an order in another case requires a parent to make child support payments. Parent must actually be making those current support payments. Date of filing of that order, when filed with the clerk, must be earlier than the date of filing of the order, in the case immediately before the court. Give them the cite from the code. Any order entered here that does not meet this definition may not be allowed by the court. So because there's no way to verify any of this, we thought that information was helpful. And a lot of people helped vet the language and the instructions, but certainly any of the instructions we see on Schedule B and we see in the dialog box could be improved upon, perhaps, and that's something that we would want to consider. Court name is, it's going to be the Superior Court, whatever county, Fulton County is what we're using in our example. And this is going to be civil action number, and it's going to be 06-3445, and a little made up fact pattern here. And then we have the child's name, years of birth. That's a required field we see by the asterisk. And Noelle is entering that as Lyons Brown, year of birth. You put a comma and then year of birth 2006. Yeah, comma space and then 2006. And the initial date of that order being June 25th, 2006. And you see how it's formatted, 06/ and so forth. So, and you can put a time in if you want to. That feature was added specifically for the Division of Child Support Services in situations where they might enter multiple orders in a case that are entered on the same date. And you would put right next to it AM, or right, because we know it won't be PM when it's 11:34, right? Okay, we hope not.
With electronic filing.
Well, now this would be a hearing, we would think, maybe, I don't know. But it could be the preparation of it, you're right. So it could be that late at night. Okay, we're doing $100 for the Charlie as our non-custodial parent. And then we select save. And that's going to add all this information back in on the calculator itself for your pre-existing order. And so when we go back then, and in training, we always tell people, go through and verify that this information is correct. It's easy to make a typographical mistake or to list the wrong year of the child's birth, things of that nature. So that's the reason we recommend to people in training, definitely go back and check this. So everything they're seeing is in this section for adjustment for pre-existing child support order. And you see right below it is a discretionary adjustment for the qualified child. And of course, button B is the way of making a correction. Well, if you want to just tackle that for a second. And then you would select in that required field at the top, the order that you have just entered. And you just make the selection, all the fields then populate. And then you can go in and make the correction, what did I have wrong in there, the docket number, whatever it might be. And you would save it, or if you said, gosh, this is the wrong order altogether, this was not supposed to be here, you click the remove button. And of course, cancel this I didn't mean to go in this dialog box at all.
No,
so we're going to cancel that.
Yeah, we just.
For our purposes. And we have a lot of these checks and balances boxes to make sure that you're moving around in there. So that's the short version of how we do this today. And keeping in mind, the issue, of course, is we have no way within the calculator of knowing the date of the initial order. We don't know when these dates occurred between the order in the current case and the order in the pre-existing order case. And we can't verify payment summary information. So this is where, of course, everybody involved in the process, the attorney, even the pro se litigant, the judge, clearly, the mediator, whoever's involved in adding this information has to make sure that the requirements in definition 18A and A and B are met. So this is what we want to explore. And I think Regina had some ideas. Did you want to share your thoughts on that?
Well, let's just hear from the subcommittee. And I had posed and sort of lobbed the question up, is there any way to make modifications that aren't particularly costly or time consuming to the calculator to ensure that at least the question gets asked or answered in some actionable way. If it's answered incorrectly, that all 5 of these criteria are being met, because that's really, I think, what people are complaining about to staff, and staff is struggling with, is how would you verify the information, and how do you ensure that the information being provided is correct if you wanted to verify. So I'll just lift that up. That's, as I say, the statute review subcommittee did not choose to make any changes to the statute. They say the problem is not the statute. The statute says exactly what it's supposed to say. So I lift that up to the subcommittee. See if anyone has any comments, questions to staff, or suggestions. Deborah Johnson, I think your hand is up there, so go ahead.
Could we switch to the other view that you were showing us, the sort of behind, to look at the particulars of the order?
Yeah, do you want to add another, like from the get-go, Deborah, or to edit this one?
Or just where it's displayed, is this sufficient?
Either way, either one is fine for my purposes. And I can hear that it's echoing on your end when I talk. Is there anything I can do technologically that would make that not happen?
Deborah, we're not hearing an echo on this end, so we're not sure how to help you with that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I can live with the echo if it's just me.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you clearly. You're coming through just fine.
Okay.
It's not just you. I also hear the echo when they talk.
Okay, thanks, Jill.
Okay. Well, hopefully.
So is the echo when, I'm sorry, Deborah, is the echo when we speak or when you're speaking?
I hear it
I think
when
it might be
I'm
because you're on
speaking.
speakerphone. Oh.
I am not on speakerphone. Oh, but maybe because they are, that's why we're hearing that.
We have a big speaker in the middle of the table here. That's how we're hearing you all.
Deborah, do you feel comfortable continuing?
I'm okay continuing. I just wanted to know if it was happening to you, I would do whatever I could on my end to fix it. But it sounds like we'll just carry on.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to me that verifying is something that the calculator itself can't do. So I'm going to focus not so much on verification, that is, you know, having a copy of the old order or something like that. That's not part of the calculator. That's a question of fact that they ought to be dealing with in the hearing or the mediation. But I do think that the questions, the way the calculator is asking for the information, could be improved in ways that would make it so that the necessary information would at least be presented to the decision makers. Right now, I think even though the boilerplate information at the top here explains what the rules are, my experience from lots of years of advising pro se people is that people don't read instructions very much, and they're more likely to just, if they're on this page, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to not pay any attention to the 4 lines at the top. They're going to see the first field says court name and they're just going to put it in. So I think we can have the best effect by doing things with the labels on the various fields and perhaps adding a couple of fields. The ones that come to my mind are, let's see, about the 4th field on this screen is date of initial order. And reading that, people are not going to be thinking about the technical definition of an initial order. What they're going to be thinking about is what's the date on the order that we're wanting to consider to be a pre-existing order. And so they're going to look at that order, and if it was entered on June 25th, 2006, then that's the date they're going to put in there, even if there was a temporary order in the same case that was 2 years earlier, which would be really the appropriate date. So I think the only way of getting people to understand that there may be a different date that is the proper date to enter in that field besides the date on the order they're looking at is if we had two dates we ask for. One is the date of the first order in that case, or the first order concerning those children, or however we want to frame it, whether it was a temporary order or an unmodified order or whatever we want to call it. But the first order, I think the word first will be an important clue to people. And then we ask for the date of the order that's currently in effect for that family. And maybe we should ask them actually in the opposite order. First ask for the currently in effect order, and then ask, was there any earlier order in that case or between those parents and children, or however we want to frame it. The other place where I think having two questions instead of one would help get the information that we need is on the bottom two fields. We're asking for the amount paid by a particular parent. Well, that phrasing is accurate. What they're supposed to get credit for is what they actually pay. But that's not how people interpret it. When real life people are filling this out, the amount they put in that field is the amount on the order. Whether that amount is actually being paid by the parent or not, and whether it includes arrears or not. Although some people are wise to the idea that arrears payments don't count. So I think if we add a second question, we want to ask the amount that is required under the current order. And then we also want to ask, and maybe we have to add two questions here, but we want to ask the current amount required by the order. Then we want to ask the average amount actually being paid by that parent on that order. And then perhaps we want to ask if any amount being paid is payment for arrears, how much is the arrears so that they get excluded. But I haven't thought about that part. I thought about the earlier part. So anyway, it seems to me that if we add a couple of questions here or add a couple extra fields to make people give us the information that we think we're asking for here, but that people don't realize we're asking for, then I think that would help.
That, Deborah, and I hope maybe we fixed your echo because I muted you all in the room as you were talking. So hopefully that helped a little bit, maybe. I think, Ryan, Mr. Bradley, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I agree with Deborah in that folks don't read instructions or directions a lot. I'm guilty of that myself. but maybe what we could do instead of changing the system is create instructional videos. Most people will go look on YouTube to try to figure out how to do something. You could link it from the AOC website. And you could just go through and show this is what we're looking for here. You could do it section by section, schedule by schedule.
Sure. This is Noelle. Hey there, Ryan. Yeah, we currently have 8 videos permanently on the child support website, and we're happy, that we've broken down our typical hour or so long training that we do monthly via Zoom into segments, more digestible segments. They range from like 8 to 10 minutes or so, but we're happy to do a training video focused. I mean, I know we have one dedicated solely to Schedule B. I'm sure it's on there, but
We do.
but we can take a look at that and see if we can improve it in any way.
Are those only available or published on your website?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're
Yes.
accessible through the commission's website.
Our IT people are on this call, Ryan, so they're listening. And I know that they have thought processes that take them into the direction of what more can we do and how can we make it more user-friendly? That's just the way they think. So we could definitely talk with them about, could there be a way to include some sort of video within the calculator itself?
Oh, is that what it is?
I mean, that's one of the things I'm thinking about because right now we have the blue question marks that allows you to click and look at some information, read that information. I've already been talking with Christy King, who's the manager of that group, about the idea of, could we make those blue question marks something that you don't necessarily have to read, but it's being read to you when you click on it. So we're already talking about some ideas, not dissimilar from what you're suggesting, but I was thinking, so they don't have to leave the calculator, perhaps it's information that they get within the calculator.
And just
Perhaps.
FYI, I stopped sharing my screen and I'm re-sharing from the commission's website. These are the videos that are currently up there. I'm just in now looking at them. Maybe we're using prime real estate for, I don't like, even though I've seen this page many times, it's dawning on me that wasting space by saying video 1, video 2, maybe we could put the content there, sort of flip it. But you'll see video 1 is literally about like creating your user account and logging in. It's not till video 5 that we get to Schedule B, but this video covers, right.
But Ryan, do you have more to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
I do think maybe more access would help though, because I never knew this existed.
Okay. And that was all prepared for self-represented litigants. That was the purpose of that. And so it's there under training on the Child Support Commission website.
Any other questions or comments, observations from subcommittee members, current subcommittee members? All right, so I will just task staff. We're going to sort of maybe get with IT and discuss what would be necessary to do any of these things that the subcommittee has brought up to consider. And along those same lines, I'll just observe that interestingly, the child support worksheets themselves are not sworn statements. When people do them, nobody has to. Part of the problem here, I guess, as well, for people who perhaps are doing it intentionally, maybe intentionally misrepresenting the amount that they're paying on a pre-existing order. Maybe there needs to be some discussion about something in the worksheet itself that requires it to be electronically signed in the same way a pleading is signed by somebody that's making a representation to the court, because in many instances, people are only submitting worksheets and no other pleadings in some situations. So I just roll that out there for the purposes of accountability and the ability of a judge to do something if someone is intentionally gaming the system with this pre-existing order question, if that's what staff is hearing. And we'll discuss that further and bring some things back to the subcommittee at our next meeting. All right, let's move on then, staff, to discussion of the low-income deviation work group's work. And that actually is, we delayed having this organization until after this work group had finished their work, which Elaine can walk us through the timeline of that just a little bit as she makes the announcement to you, and the discussion leads the discussion of this entry in the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Regina. One of the things that came out of the low-income deviation study committee that was authorized by the Child Support Commission in late 2018, and work really began in early 2019, and then unfortunately, you know, the pandemic hit. But in the process of all of that, the low-income deviation study committee completed a report. I think it was December 2020. One of the things that came out of that report was suggesting there needed to be a work group pulled together with the sole purpose of being able to look at the current functionality of the low income deviation within the calculator to see, is there a better way that we could deliver what is required to include a low income deviation, and what is, you know, making that ease of use more available to the people who are completing this particular edition of a deviation. One of the things we've observed in prior years of case sampling, and even up to the 2022 case sampling that we've just completed of our child support guidelines and the table, is that we can see that, and anecdotally we've been told the same thing as well, is that not everyone uses the low income deviation as they should, because they are having difficulty understanding how to use it within the calculator, and that it's easier just to use a non-specific deviation. And, you know, because that's kind of the kitchen sink of the calculator, is the non-specific deviation on Schedule E, although it still has to be explained and justified in answering the findings of fact questions. But again, what Noelle and I have done here is prepared a worksheet where we have you know, worksheets prepared, Schedule A is prepared, and Schedule D. Now we've also added Schedule B, which is our adjusted gross income for the non-custodial parent, based on the $100 a month in child support in a pre-existing order that is actually being paid. So we know this one's right. But we want to talk with you on how Regina asked us if we would demo, how do we get that low income deviation. So Noelle's going to open this worksheet back up for us. And again, I'm going to step a tiny bit closer.
Yes, Elaine, just for clarification, what I was just showing you was the worksheet results based on what Elaine and I took you through earlier, up through adjusting the gross income. Now we're going to jump over to E and deviate.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so well, if you'll, yeah, there she is. Okay, so let's just sort of sit here for just a minute. Just scroll down just a tiny bit so we can see. There you go, that's perfect. Okay, one of the things that okay, so the low income deviation changed in the statute as of September 1st of 2009. There was a bill that we changed from having a self-support reserve to this particular requirements in the statute of looking at a person's, the non-custodial parent in particular, looking at that person's economic situation, you know, whether the presumption is going to be too high, are they in an extreme economic hardship. In fact, well, if you click the button, that's the blue button, the second one on the screen in the white box. There we go. The language that's in this little box here is coming directly from the statute. And what you're looking at here, of course, and if you can scroll down and show, and all that's in there, so you can okay close that box for us. We also provide the statute itself, the 19615 I2B, which is where you find all things related to low-income deviation. And so when we, and Regina may remember this, but because I think you were on that work group or whatever we called it back then, there was a lot of attention given to how do we make this function as best we can. And at that time, this was the end result so that it's relatively easy to use. So what we're going to do at this point is for this particular case, we have a sense of that these parents are, and the non-custodial parent in particular, is a low-income parent, although his income is higher than minimum wage of $7.25 an hour or 40 hours a week, or $1261.50. And per the Uniform Superior Court Rule 24.2A, always point that out. We have always take that to training to make sure people are aware of the rule. So let's click 49A, and you'll notice there's a 49A and 49B. 49A is, this is the only place in the calculator where you add, edit, and remove low-income deviation as proposed. And the reason for that is at B, that's where judicial discretion is applied, to add, edit, remove. So that's the reason this looks different from any other deviation you see on Schedule E. So in our calculation here for low income, again, instructions, and again, it was, lots of people looked at what detail we're putting in there. The deviation is 4, is going to auto-populate, that's a required field, but if you'll click the drop down there, Noel, for us, you can see that if there were other names, if it was a situation where you were selecting both mother and father for non-custodial parents, it would list those names. So you have the option of making that selection. In the calculator, you can release that. In the calculator, because the statute says the request can come from the non-custodial parent, or it could be the judge, it could be the Division of Child Support Services saying, we think this is appropriate for this case. It could be the custodial parent saying, I really know that the father of my children is low income, and this should be included. But that name is required. It auto-populates after having made the selection for the non-custodial parent. And if that has not been selected, the calculator will give you an error message and take you back to the worksheet page. You can make a non-custodial parent selection. Number of children in case 2 is auto-populated because the calculator understands that there's a minimum amount of child support in this particular order, and that's where we get to the next number. This is what we hear from a lot of people is the mystery number is confusing. And that's, we understand that. And it may be that some instruction, and we do say, we have an instruction up there in section 1, the maximum amount of low income deviation field will display an amount that is used by the calculator to preserve the minimum amount of child support allowed. And then we cite what the statute says. So, or the side of the statute. So that may not be clear enough. That may be part of the issue. I'm sure Deborah Johnson's thinking about it right now. I can just see her wheels turn. And I appreciate that, Deborah. But at any rate, what you see here, that 31205, is literally the calculator looking at line 9 of the worksheet itself. If you want to cancel,
Yeah, I'm going to cancel and show them.
And what we can do is actually display the worksheet and show you line 9, the presumptive amount of child support. And if you look at line 9 for father, 46206, and we don't have a low income deviation added here at this point, but that's what we're going to do so you can see the outcome. But in order to get the child support to $150 for 2 children, which is what statute says will be the minimum amount of child support, because it's $100 for 1 child, an additional $50 for each additional child, then we would be in a situation where we have to know what is the difference of 150 and the 462 and change. That difference is 31205. So that is your deviation amount. If you are if you're the non-custodial parent preparing this worksheet and maybe you're like, I want to zero my child support, here's my chance. then you might put in something much higher than 312, thinking you're gonna get to a zero child support. And the stat, and we programmed the calculator to understand there's a minimum amount. And of course, the statute says other deviations may still occur, but at least with this deviation, it would hold it to 150. So even if you put $800 or $1,000 in the,
Do you want me to do it?
yeah, if you want to, you can put a negative, 800 or whatever.
Sorry.
500 is fine. Anything above the 312.05, the calculator is going to simply ignore it.
Do you want me to save?
Yeah,
Good, try to save.
okay. And you can see the negative 500. Now, what we've done is add, you have to go back and display. We've added a deviation of low income, for low income. So what else gonna, oh, you don't have your findings of fact answered.
The lawyer herself did not.
And for training purposes, we are, we'll put in like training or there we go, demos. We just need to move beyond this momentarily and display. And then you can see that there's the 46206 and there's the 312. Is it 5 or 6? I'm sorry. Okay, 5. Thank you. And there's the 150 as, which is your subtotal. So your difference between the 312 and the 462 is the 150, and that's what we have to preserve.
Even though I put in 500.
Right, because the calculator understands, no, if I use 500 as the deviation, as the negative amount, it was 0. We explained to it many years ago in 09 that no, you have to preserve the minimum, which the statute requires. So now the judge could, or could even tell you as the attorney or whomever, DCSS could do the same thing. If you actually insert, what we train is to go into 49B, and then you could actually insert a lower sum than the 312, and that would make the child support amount higher than the 150.
Or the person themselves could do it.
Yes, or then you could do it. If the parents are, through a mediation, the parents are saying, well, 150 is not going to be enough to really, help me with the kids, but could you make it 175 or something? So then you could go in and put a deviation lower than 312.05, and I don't know what that would be right at the moment, but if you just even put in 300, it's going to give us a higher amount than 150.
Right, and I think I should go back and show it on the worksheet.
Yeah.
Right, so you can't go lower than that minimum amount of
Right.
deviation.
If you go higher, trying to zero the child support, it's going to prevent that. But you can see in this situation, the calculator said, okay, we preserved the 150, which is what the law said to do. If you're telling me to go higher than the 150, it can do that because the statute says you can even have, this deviation, other deviations could impact the low income. So this is how it works today. And if you'll go back to, well, you can do it from here, Noel, if you will, go to Schedule E on the display at the top. Yeah.
Sure, so let me just add to that. The way I see that is if in a certain case, the judge doesn't want to deviate from 462, which was our presumptive amount, all the way down to 150, which is the absolute bare minimum low income child support amount. If you can have something in between that, and that's what we just showed.
Exactly. If you go below the 312 and change, it's going to give you a higher.
Right, like the judge might say, I'm not going to take you down to 150, but I will reduce child support by $100, and then you just deduct 100, and it would take it down to 362 as the final child support amount.
Well, in the low income deviation, you couldn't actually do that, because it's preserving the 150. If you you're talking about going above, or did I misunderstand?
No, yeah.
You're saying go below?
Go below.
Right.
Like the judge says, sometimes I think they speak in terms of not of the deviation amount, but what they want the final order amount to be.
Well, see, like in our deviation example, we did 300. So if you do lower than 300, yes, it's going to continue to raise that 162 to 175 or whatever. Yes. Okay, so this is how it works today. And this is where, if you look at, again, talking about that mystery number, the 312 and change, that's what people seem to have the most trouble understanding, that Because if they just go into low income deviation, they see that deviation amount there, the instruction says we're preserving the 150. If they understand there are 2 children. But I think those nuances are lost on folks, and I get that, I understand it. So again, this may be similar to what we're talking about with pre-existing, in that it could be that instructions could be improved upon, display could be improved upon, but this was the work of the work group. So we gave you a handout that dealt with several of the folks on that subcommittee. Aubrey Burgesson had a suggestion. Ryan Bradley had a suggestion that we've included in that handout, Deborah Johnson, and also Liz Schreiber. Liz is with the Division of Child Support Services, and so is Ryan Bradley. Now, staff, we also came up with an idea that we thought might be useful in the looking at what we're using today. It's just another idea. So there's several really wonderful ideas here. Some of them are dealing with just how can we make it easier with the current function, how can we improve that? Deborah and Liz both had ideas of entertaining how folks figure out is my case a low income case. You remember, and Regina's going to remember this, there was the day back in 2007 when the statute was originally passed that low income deviation included the self-support reserve, and you started with an income of $1,850 or less. All right, the problem was that the commission, and this hit in 2008, when we had the housing market economic crisis, and we had some of the commission members, in particular Seth Harp, who was our chair at that time, Senator Harp, and he even talked about a case, a gentleman had come into his office for legal advice in a divorce, and his income was $2,500 gross a month, and he felt like that individual may still be low income, but by the calculator, if you're 1851 or more, you couldn't, the statute rather, you couldn't be considered as low income. So that's where all of that change initially came from, was making sure that it was broader. You would be able to look at what's required in the statute and say that, yes, this is extreme economic hardship, even though this person's above 1850 in income, and still make this a low income deviation included in that case. So there was a lot of good intent in making sure that low income was not so hardwired, because that was one of the complaints we were hearing was, well, the non-custodial in this case had a gross adjusted income of 1851 or 1857 and could not receive the low income deviation. So that was why all of this got changed in 2009. But we're still in that, we train this, try to help people understand how this works, but it may still not be the easiest or best way. So we have that, we have the wisdom and knowledge of a lot of people who took a look at this in the work group and came up with some very viable ideas. And like I was saying about Deborah and Liz's, they're actually delving into how do I figure out that I fit in the extreme economic hardship arena of this question. So that's why you'll see some, very simple suggestions here to those that are a lot more involved. So I'm gonna unless there are questions of Regina, I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Yeah, so to the members of the subcommittee and the hopefully future members of the subcommittee, here's the way we're going to sort of organize our work around this. We've got some things going on in the background here that are very important with the full commission. And in particular, I lift up for you this presentation that's going to be made on August the 19th, this economic presentation, because we are likely, I may guess, that we may be likely to see some changes to the basic child support obligation table that are going to be statutory changes. And so what I'd like to do is, first of all, I'm not going to cut off any discussion or questions before 11:30 today, but then after the meeting, I want all the members to send to me which ones of these proposals you would like to work on. for a fuller, more detailed presentation at the next subcommittee meeting. And by that time, hopefully we'll have some idea about what's happening in the background that's immensely important in terms of potential statutory changes to the child support guidelines. So again, I'm not going to cut off discussion or questions to staff. And Deborah, I know some of these ideas are yours, and you've got great experience and passion in this area. So if you want to ask questions of staff or have some things to say, I'll recognize you now for that.
This is Deborah. Is it okay if I speak now? Okay. I also was on that low-income deviation committee back in 2008, 2009. And I actually don't remember that the previous statute had a self-support reserve. What I remember is the big deal at that time was what you were talking about with Senator Harp, saying that there shouldn't be a maximum income that a person could have to qualify for low income deviation. And so that was eliminated, but I don't think there ever was a self-support reserve in Georgia. Some other states have it, but I don't think we have or had it in the past. But I'll certainly look at my notes from back then and see if I can remember anymore. I think the other thing I wanted to clarify is I think that Liz and I, in our two proposals to that low-income deviation calculator work group, it was not just to figure out not just to help somebody figure out whether or not they might qualify, but to help people to be led through the process of presenting the information that the statute actually required them to present to the decision maker, so that the court could make the decision, or whoever was deciding could make the decision. And the statute has a fair number of required things that that the decision maker has to know when they're making the decision. So I think that the things that Liz and I were doing were both aimed at that, as well as helping people figure out if they qualify.
Thank you, Deborah. Anybody else have on the subcommittee have questions or comments about the staff presentation or the work to come? All right, to any member of the public that's participating in the meeting, we do not take public comment at subcommittee meetings. I see some information that there may be some folks trying to speak. If you will please simply put your comments or questions in the Q&A. I believe it's the Q&A function in Zoom. That's where we will be able to pick that up, and the members of the subcommittee will be able to include your comments in their analysis and the presentation for the next meeting. So just wanted to make that clarification. So what everybody needs to get from me, if there are no more questions or comments from existing subcommittee members, current subcommittee members, then everybody needs to get to me bad days for you. I know some members already have said Thursdays are bad, Wednesdays are bad. Days that may be bad generally for future meetings, I'm going to try to put 2 meeting dates on the books between now and the beginning of the legislative session, so that we've got time to deal with whatever task the full commission needs for us to deal with before the legislative session begins. So if you've got bad days, shoot me an email and let me know what to avoid, and I'll be working with staff to go ahead and try to put some save the date emails out. If you have proposals from our work group, ideas identified by the work group that you would like to work on and have input in on this low income deviation issue, let me know that as well, so that I can make some assignments for our continuing work outside of the actual committee meeting process. All right, staff, did I forget anything before we adjourn? Anything anybody else needs to tell everybody?
So I think we're covered.
All right, I will encourage everybody to, again, either appear at or tune into, if it's hybrid, the commission meeting on the 19th that will be at the Deal Judicial Center on August the 19th, and a very important, I expect, meeting of the Statute Review Subcommittee is going to be on August the 12th. I think that's just a hybrid meeting, a Zoom meeting.
That's amazing.
It's not an in-person hybrid meeting. So let's stay abreast of what's happening. And if there's any questions anybody have, I hope everybody has my cell number. But if not, I'll send it out in the emails a little later today and make sure that everybody has that to contact me. That's always the best and most direct way to contact me. Anything else for the good of the order to the hardworking staff?
Well, anything you can think of? I think we're in good shape.
All right, well, from the State Bar headquarters here, we will adjourn the meeting and I'll see you all next time. Thank you for your attendance and participation.
See y'all.
Recording stopped. The recording has stopped.
Thank you.